You are listening to the One Day at a Time Recovery Podcast. On this podcast, my guests share their stories of alcoholism, addiction, and how they recovered so that you can too. My hope is that you find the inspiration and resources you need to let go of what's holding you back so that you can transform into the person you were always meant to be. Ready? Here we go. Loneliness, isolation, anxiety, and depression are just some of the feelings that plague us when we're in the throes of addiction. They are the reason a lot of people drink and get caught in the cycle of a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol. Today, my guest, Nick Jonsson, shares his experience of abusing alcohol, losing his marriage, and the depths of his despair before finally finding a solution that transformed his life. Nick has taken what he has learned and written a book for those in the corporate world who are struggling in silence in hopes of bringing solutions for a more peaceful, connected, and fulfilling life. It was actually so interesting for me to hear how in some parts of the world the message of recovery is still not reaching the people who need it the most. There's still so much stigma attached to alcoholism. I would encourage you, my loyal subscribers, to share this episode with all your friends. You just never know who you might be able to help. And I do have one quick announcement. I know not everybody can afford private coaching, so if you feel like you could use some support and you're willing to record one-on-one sessions with me anonymously, then shoot me an email at arlena@odatchat.com or visit soberlifeschool.com and set up a free strategy call. The way this will work is I will take maybe one or two listeners through some coaching sessions, record them, and then publish them anonymously as bonus episodes so that others can learn how to process through challenging situations. So if you think you could benefit from some coaching and you're willing to be of service to others, then shoot me an email and I'll look forward to speaking with you. So without further delay, please enjoy this episode with Nick. Well, Nick, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Alina. Thank you so much.
We were just talking. I can't believe how early it is there for you. What time is it there right now?
It's 4:30 local time. I'm over in Southeast Asia. Yeah.
4:30 a.m. Yes, it's my 3:30 p.m. So technology is a fun thing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for arranging it.
Yeah, no, I thought this would be really good. I don't often get to talk to men that are sort of in like that coaching role. So it's nice to have you here today so that they can get to know you and reach out to you if they need support. I always like to start the podcast with a little game I call the lightning round, which is very slow. So like when you first started your sober journey, was there a book that really spoke to you or helped you out in the beginning?
Yes, I came into actually about 6 years ago. I came into recovery myself, and I was recommended one of the books in the world of recovery. And I remember there was a book in there called Living Sober. And this book, Living Sober, just had a lot of very, very simple tips. The kind of tips you need when you just are coming into sobriety.
Yeah, that's actually really good. That one's been around for a really long time. Do you recall some of the types of tips it gave you?
Yes, I do, and it's really hands-on. It's so basic tips, but it's I think what stood out was, especially those early days, was how do you socialize? Because that is perhaps one of the biggest concerns. People will say, oh, "I have this big social network. I have friends. What should I do if I stop drinking?"
Yeah, that's really important. It's funny how, they say that times change, but people don't. And that still today, I feel like is one of the biggest concerns is like, how do I socialize sober? How do I go out to dinner? How do I go to parties? How do I, go to work events? That's a really important part. And I don't know, do you have a strategy for what you do when you go to a social event?
So I have learned to try to just be as honest as I can. I think when I was trying to say something that wasn't really the truth, then I got into trouble in myself. But these days I just say that, I'm just on a journey of living a healthy life. I'm eating a healthy and clean diet, and I just don't want any poison in my body, and being an athlete, and I'm having
Yeah.
a triathlon next week, and in
Yeah.
fact, and I would say, in fact, no one of the people in my training group are drinking. It's just not a part of the life we want to live.
That is being a triathlete. That is like the perfect excuse not to drink. It's like I gotta get up early and ride that bike for a very long ways. I always found that if I walked in and grabbed a drink right away, then nobody would offer me anything. Right. So, like, and then I usually had somebody with me so that if somebody was trying to push a drink on me, they could run interference, like, hey, let's go talk to so and so over there, or they would interrupt and change the subject, like, hey, what are you doing later this weekend? Or, it was just nice to have something in my hand already and then someone to run interference. But it's kind of funny, these little strategies we have to think about ahead of time before we go socialize.
I completely agree with you. It's very good to be ready for that conversation, even better, as you say, be proactive, grab something by yourself. If you're asked, however, I think the answer we should try to avoid perhaps is to say, no, I'm not drinking. And then people
Yeah.
will start questioning that. I found that it's better to just be very confident. And if someone is asking, what are you drinking? Yeah, I'd love to have a drink. Do you have a sparkling water or something like that? So you just go
Yeah.
straight into what you want.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good one. Um, if you think about the 6 years that you've been sober, do you have sort of a mantra? There's lots of cliches. I like the one day at a time. Is there something that keeps coming back to you as a mindset for sobriety?
Yeah, I think I'm very aligned with you, Alina, about the one day at a time. I think that's the one that stood out. I think I was not living in the moment so much before, and I think I was worrying too much about the future, and that fueled my anxiety and therefore my drinking. So I have to say on this one, I say that one day at a time is
Yeah.
something that just is just so cemented, and
Yeah.
that's the way I want to live these days.
Yeah. I just couldn't wrap my head around like abstinence forever, like not drinking forever. But I would, maybe tomorrow, but not today, sometimes it was like 1 hour at a time. But just like that little mental trick of chunking it down into something that I could really get a grip on. Yeah, that is a good one. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Do you have, listen, I know you're an athlete, so you probably do a lot of self-care, a lot of exercise, but do you have like a morning routine where you do like meditation or anything like that? What does your mornings look like?
Yeah, I do have a morning routine, and it is about meditation. It also involves prayer, and I write my daily gratitude list, and I share my daily gratitude list in three different groups,
Mm.
and that holds me accountable, but also helping some others. And so those three groups where I share my daily gratitude list, and I tweak it and tailor it a little bit depending on the audience. But one is a very broad audience in a company I'm running, where we have confidential peer groups for people who want to share knowledge. And in there we have different platforms. And one of them I created there is daily gratitude list. Then I belong to a men's group where I share it. And then I have also a sobriety group where we share it. So, and it's just a really good day a good way to start the day.
That is so cool that you have like so many different communities, a professional community, a men's community and a sobriety community. Is the men's community also a sobriety group? Is it
It,
based on
it,
sobriety or something else?
No, it doesn't have to be. As it happened, about 30-40% of the men in the group are sober. The others are considering it.
Hmm.
But we cover all kind of topic in that men's group. Last night we covered children and the responsibility and letting go when they're growing up. So that was the topic last night. But
Oh
sobriety is
man.
definitely something that is covered from time to time.
Man, so I'm at that age where my kids are older. and the whole letting go. That's that's listen, we could do a whole podcast episode just on that piece. That is so cool that you have this men's group that you participate that is not necessarily surrounded on sobriety. I feel like it's so important for, women too, but women, I think women are we are sort of biologically designed to cluster and have groups of friends. And I don't know that that's true for men. What do you think? Is that not necessarily the case?
It's very rare for men, it seems. And
Yeah,
while we men might be talking about sport or having a good time together and so on, we perhaps don't talk about the challenging things. We are
yeah,
avoiding those conversations. And that is the purpose of this group. I say that we are practicing our vulnerability muscle in this
yeah,
men's group. And the men who have joined say that it's just such a relief after every time you have been speaking about something that's been on your chest, right? So it is
yeah.
something that I'm actually expanding, and I think it's a big need out there.
Oh, huge. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Listen, a lot these days, people are not going to like religious communities as much as they used to. And if you're not in a sober community where that's sort of expected, or I don't know if expected is the right word, but do you know what I mean? It's like that's what we do in those sobriety groups is really share from the heart and get vulnerable, and we're comfortable with that. I often think, what are my sons supposed to do? One's 24 and the other's 21 almost. It's like, where is their place in the world? And I think it's so important that the men that are ahead of them demonstrate that it's not only okay, but important to find other people who think like you and meet regularly to share what's going on in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because you're not sober doesn't mean that you have no problems or issues in your life. It might be the opposite, right? So, and this is the
Yeah.
lead way in, of course. I mean, as I mentioned, we cover addictions or sobriety as one of the topic. It's covered a few times a year, right? So it's
Yeah.
also for them to learn from the ones who are in sobriety and having those conversations together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. And what I love about sharing a gratitude list is oftentimes when I work with women and I ask them, I use something called the 5 minute journal. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's has like three sections. So it's three things that you're grateful for, three things that would make the day great, has an affirmation. And then at the end of the day, you can write down what the highlights were for the day. But it's so interesting when I ask, my clients to fill this out. I'm surprised at how often they have a hard time connecting with a gratitude practice. And I think it's so helpful to, like, I share mine sometimes just to get the ball rolling so they can but I think that's so interesting that when you share your gratitude list, I'm sure you see theirs as well, right? So you get ideas from what other people are grateful for as well. Is that true?
Absolutely, and I do
Yeah.
like you. I try to lead by example, and I think I haven't missed a day probably for half a year or something like that. And if I
Nice.
miss it in the morning because there's a lot of things happening or traveling or something, then I use it as a moment to send it when I can, and in the evening or something like that.
I don't typically ask people this, but why do you feel it's so like what was it that made you decide that your self-care practice was so important? Like that was a priority?
I think when you've been running your life, basically trying to live up to society's norm, running at a very very high speed in a work where all you care about is the security and financial wealth and the career, the promotions, and all of those things, then you have neglected yourself for a long time. And that is the realization I came to, and that is the realization that I have with many of the men then that I have in my men's group, for example. They perhaps hitting around 53, 54, 55, around there. And that's when normally something have happened. Maybe the health is letting them down. They're ending up in a hospital or perhaps a divorce or something, because people have, by that time, you've been sort of, working for 30 years, perhaps straight, without questioning what are you doing.
Yeah. That midlife crisis is a real thing for sure. Like stuff by the time you're my age, all that stuff catches up to you if you haven't been paying attention. But yeah, no, I agree. It's important to do that self-care practice. If all we're doing is giving. and not replenishing, that's a recipe for disaster for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can just add on that because I have a session, a one-on-one a session today with a man who is 53, and he has done no self-care for as many years as he can remember. And we have been trying to brainstorm for a few days to try to think, what is it that he used to do for self-care? What would he like to do, or what would he love to do, or even what he enjoy doing or love doing in life? And he cannot even connect with that. He says, it's just too long. I just been working. I really, really don't know. So he's at that
That's
stage at
wild.
the moment now. It's tough, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that makes me feel like he's got to go through a little experimenting, like an experimenting phase. Like he's just gonna have to try some stuff out, or maybe just do what you do, just do the whole modeling thing, right? Maybe not a triathlon at 53, but maybe go for a walk. I don't know. That's awesome. If you look back and think about where you were 6 years ago, what is one thing you wish you would have known right from the beginning?
I wish I would have known earlier how wonderful life would be in sobriety. I think it was not something that was often spoken about. I didn't have the education about it. I mean, I had picked up some books now and then to read about, stopping or controlling alcohol or whatever those kind of books were. But it was nothing that really inspired me to take that extra step. It really needed that sort of nail in the coffin. I had to get really hurt, and many bad things had to happen in my life for me to take action. And I think it's sad that I had to hit my own sort of rock bottom in order to sober up. I wish there was a middle path there, which would have been a little bit easier.
Yeah, no, I hear that. And you bring up an interesting point. I'm going to circle back to this. You did mention in our pre-interview chat that in the area that you were born in, that drinking is highly, like alcoholism is highly stigmatized. So I want to, I want to get to that, but I want to kind of start with your childhood because so often that sort of sets the stage for everything else. Can you tell me a little bit about what your childhood was like in Sweden? That's where you grew up
Yes.
in Sweden?
Yeah, so I was born in Sweden, and I left Sweden in 1998 as a 23-year-old. So but it was definitely Sweden where I grew up, and a sort of country town. And I was not exposed to any alcohol or any, should I say, negative events in my life. I was very protected until I was about age 13, 14. And that's when we moved with my parents to a bit of a larger city, and I went from perhaps an average student to one of the worst in class because it was a different curriculum and so on.
Mm.
And that put me under a lot of pressure and stress for the first time in my life. And the friends I picked up then was the ones who were, at the perhaps the worst performers in class, and we turned into uh, petty crime, smoking, motorbikes, and that kind of stuff. And it was about competing who could do the who could always impress someone in that space. And that was what I got caught in for a few years there. And that is set me on a stage that was not good. I was later on able to break that pattern, but I had a few very tough years that was challenging for me.
Do you feel like that time, like moving is hard at any age, but at 13, 14, that is such a pivotal age to be moving. That's like right when you're discovering who you are. What did that do to your self-esteem to be in a new environment and being the worst student? What did that do to your self-esteem?
Yeah, I didn't really know what to do. I was turning to anything I could apart from focusing on the studies, and those I was trying to avoid it to any price. I got quite fanatical about music at age sort of 15, going to concerts and just trying really to uh, focus on other things, and as I said, motorbikes and so on. And but the confidence was blown. But my way to cope was with avoidance. And then at that age also I found alcohol, and that worked. And it was perfectly okay for 15-year-olds to drink beer from time to time. I mean, it was not something that our parents encouraged, but it was also not something that they could stop. So we started, especially at age 16, to have some parties and so on, and that was my escape then, and I found the joy in that.
Yes, I understand. The joy of booze at 15. Um, I would imagine the environment or the culture is different in Sweden. Like here it would be very frowned upon for at least where I am to allow a 15-year-old to drink in your house. Like, did you drink openly in front of your parents? Like it just wasn't a big deal?
No, we wouldn't do it so openly in front of our parents, but from 16, it was sort of okay on end of school graduation day or
Ah,
gatherings and so on. Then it was okay. I think the norm was that it's better that, the parents play along because the kid's going to do it anyway. But of course, sometimes it went completely overboard
yeah.
outside of the houses then, and then ending up coming back with the police and all kind of things
Did
was happening.
you had the police bring you home a time or two? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think mainly because it's
Like getting into
it's
fights?
no, it's still a crime, right, for underage children to have
Okay.
alcohol. So and therefore, it was all sort of issues by brewing it yourself. A lot of creative kids start brewing your own liquor and things like that at home, and then sometimes
Yeah.
being caught. So those kind of dramas.
Yeah, we
Mm.
call that hooch. You brew
Yeah.
some hooch, home brewed hooch. That's funny. So what kind of effects did alcohol have on you in the beginning? Did you black out? Were you vomiting? Did you have any negative consequences? Like were you fighting? Like those kinds of things?
As you ask me that, yes, I can remember it, but it's probably something that I wouldn't think about. I think we sort of tend to forget all the bad memories and
You
the
just
bad
block it
stuff.
out.
Yeah, we block it out, right? It's like so in that regard, yes, it happened. I got sick and vomiting and so on. I think that's part of it. But what I do remember otherwise would be the good times, the drinking beer
Yeah.
and and having those good moments with friends and so on. But yeah, there was already trouble there. And naturally, the body didn't want to hold it in a child's body, right? So there's no
Right.
wonder.
Yeah, no wonder. So when did the drinking really become a problem for you? When did you decide like this isn't something's not right? This isn't really working for me anymore?
Yeah, so if I'm looking at the age sort of, 18, 19, 20, 21 and so on, I was drinking mainly a very low percentage beer. I didn't drink much liquor at all. I didn't have the taste for wine. So because I drank very low alcohol content beer, it didn't cause too much trouble for me. It was quite some years when I was working in Sweden and so on. It was fine. Then when I was age 23, I moved to Australia. So I was
Mhm.
finally ready to start at university. So I was not really ready or mature or interested before that age to start at university. But age 23, then I started studying and moving then from cold and dark Sweden to sunny Australia on the Gold Coast and studying
Oh
there at the
my God.
university. I
With all the
really
beautiful women.
yeah, and I really got the taste for beer more. And then there they didn't have the low alcohol beer that I was buying cheap in the supermarkets in Sweden, and it was all everywhere you walked was the strong beer, and that was the one change that happened in my life then. And I started to play golf, or I picked up my child's hobby, which was golf, which was probably a good thing. But the habit was that you already have
Yeah.
a beer, you tee off, and then you play golf, you drink during, and then you drink after. So that was sort of a solid 5 6 hour session of drinking when you're
Yeah.
going out to exercise, right? So and then plus the student life and after school and
Yeah.
all the parties. So it started to really take off when I studied at university there.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty common story. You know, people go into university and they're around a bunch of kids their own age and everybody's partying. It's kind of to be expected at that age. But when did you decide that like I can't do this anymore? So like what happens? So 6 years ago, you decided that you needed to practice abstinence. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
throughout my working life, then really, I mean, drinking just took off. I worked in sales, business development, senior roles, and it was a lot of entertainment and very, very acceptable. So I never looked at it as a problem. I was managing it, controlling it. You could say I was still doing, Ironman triathlon events and so on.
Wow.
I did one full distance event around it, uh, controlling the drinking. I would stop perhaps a few days, sometimes a week or two before a race, and then I would double up after. But 6 years ago, what happened was basically I was in a very bad space, emotionally, mentally, and I just desperately couldn't take it anymore. I ran into trouble at work, and I resigned from the work, and I controlled alcohol until I resigned from my work. But after I resigned, then I had all the time and freedom, and then it just completely escalated, and I gained a lot of weight. I step by step stopped exercising, and it was basically 3 years between 2015 and 18 when I didn't exercise much, and I lost my fitness and health, and with that, then I crashed down until what I call my rock bottom.
Yeah. So were you wrestling with things like anxiety and depression and those
I
kinds of
was.
feelings? Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. I'm at my rock bottom. I remember, thinking that is this what life is supposed to be? I couldn't figure out myself how I could stop. I had not been in contact with any doctor or anyone yet. I had not spoken to any coach about it. I had not sought any help apart from reading the odd book. And looking back at it, I realized, of course, it's not so easy to figure out all these things yourself. But due to the stigma around it, I was too
Yeah.
scared to ask for help.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about the stigma that you grew up with, because I mean, there's some stigma here, but it sounded like it was worse where you grew up.
I think in Sweden, yes, the stigma, but I live and work the last 20 years in Asia, and
Mhm.
there is definitely more stigma than in the Western world. And we see this because, I mean, I've been in the world of recovery, and any gathering you have when you're talking about recovery or recovery meeting, despite that we are in Asia, 90% would be Westerners. It's very rare you have a local showing up, and that would be someone who come with a friend or something like that. But yes, I do believe, and the statistics to show this, that Westerners consume more alcohol than locals, but that doesn't mean that they don't drink. There's still a lot of alcohol consumption, but it's just so much stigma that you don't want to admit this. And we see it in the form that, for example, it would never be and I've been manning these kind of hotlines and so on around recovery and
Mhm.
alcohol recovery. And when someone called the Western, it might be the person who called, but when it was for a local Asian person, then typically it would be the spouse who would call in on behalf of the other
Ah,
person.
yeah, a lot of ladies calling about their husbands, I would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of shame and guilt still around not being able to, you know, handle your booze, so to speak. But it just sounded like it was even harder because when we spoke earlier, you mentioned like you didn't even know anything about like 12 step or traditional recoveries.
That's right. While it exists in Asia, it's not something that I came in touch with. And because many of them are anonymous and so on, and therefore you don't really hear about it. And I would have sought help early if I just would have known that it was something
Mm,
there. I didn't avoid it. I just didn't know that it existed even in Asia. So
that's
that
wild.
I know it was only thanks to a friend's friend of someone who knew, who gave my wife a phone number to someone, and that someone said, "I meet you for coffee," and that coffee happened to be by a recovery meeting. So it was and that was at the end of the line. I didn't have much more to give at that stage, so it was just my life-saving moment.
Yeah. How did your wife feel about your drinking? Did she encourage you to go get help?
So I lost my first relationship, perhaps from drinking or controlling the drinking. I don't know which was worse at the time. 13 years marriage. And then as I was basically hitting my rock bottom, I met a woman, and we got married, and she really didn't understand much about it. She's from Indonesia, where they don't have a big drinking culture. She just thought that Westerners just drink, and I didn't drink too much. I was just medicating myself slowly, so she didn't
Yeah.
even really realize and that I was as much as I was drinking, I was hiding it, and so therefore she understood that I was drinking, but she just thought that was Western to do.
Did I hear you right? You said you met her like as you were hitting rock bottom?
Yeah, I met her. I
Oh.
got married. I got married 3 weeks before my rock bottom, but it was only on the
Oh, she had no
inside.
idea what she was getting into.
No, and actually on the outside, I think, and I explained this in my book I wrote, Executive Loneliness. I call the concept smiling depression. I believe the
Yeah.
more we are in pain inside, the more we're falling apart. The more we smile on the outside. We do everything we can to make sure that no one catch us or understand that there
Right.
might be something that is on our mind and pain inside. So I
Yeah.
was, always at that time, even at my rock bottom, the life of the party, the jolliest in the room and lifting everyone up. And I just remember her saying, because she had seen me, at the parties really drinking and in the center of attention, and she had seen me some mornings being quiet. She said, when I was saying that I was stop drinking, she didn't push me, even recommend it to me. But when I said it, she said, but will you be happy again? That was her concern.
Oh, wow. That's really intense. Just,
Yeah,
they say, have you heard that saying that people don't fake depression, they fake happiness?
there you go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So
Yes.
how did you get sober then? What happened that you were able to get help and quit?
Yeah, so I remember trying on uh, 4th of May 2018 myself. That was a few days after I'd been to my first meeting, and I didn't sober up right after my first recovery meeting, but the seed was planted, and I,
Mhm.
I was thinking about it, and then I made the decision to try on May 4. And my wife was with me then, and I tried, and I around lunchtime I couldn't. I had cravings and things like that, and I asked her to please help me, because it was difficult, and she went to buy some beer for me. I drank them while promising that we try tomorrow again, and we went to the hospital the next day, and they then helped
Wow.
me with medication and B complex injection and these kind of
Mm.
things.
Yeah.
And it worked. Since then, I haven't had a drink.
That's amazing. What kind of medication? Was it something like a Vivitrol? I've been hearing like
It
things
was
that
a
help.
lot. It was a lot, Aline. And and
That's a
and
lot.
and it was a lot because I was also in depression, anxiety, was sleeping pill. It
Yeah.
was so much medication that
Yeah.
they gave her, and she became my nurse basically for a few months.
Oh,
And as I started with a heavy dose and then basically tapering off it.
okay. Yeah. So it's been six. So you just had a milestone. It's just been,
Yes.
it was, yeah, congratulations. Six. That's a big deal.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I have my natural birthday on May 1, and then
Oh,
this birthday on May 5, and this always feels bigger.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, in the US, we celebrate Cinco de Mayo is a big deal. So
Mm.
that's a fun day. Well, congratulations. That's a quite an accomplishment. And I can imagine that your life has changed dramatically since then. How have your relationships changed?
Yes, it has changed a lot. Of course, I managed to make amends with my past, and just
Mm,
changed up. Many of my friends, some of my old friends are still there, but a lot of new friends, of course,
yeah.
and just rethinking most of the decisions in my life. I run a life with a lot less pressure in every aspect, because I no longer try to chase. I don't have to live in the nicest apartment. I'm okay with the more basic things in my life these days, which
Yeah.
means that there's less pressure, and
Right.
that makes me much more comfortable. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a beautiful thing. We don't really talk about spirituality too much. Do you have a spiritual practice? You mentioned a little bit of prayer, meditation. What does that look like for you?
Yeah, that is basically as far as the spirituality go, and it's about the prayer and the meditation, but really, yeah, handing it over somehow and learning to trust some power greater than yourself. It starts there, but I think the spirituality, then when you have that as foundation, that means that you're accepting to yourself that you don't have all the answers. And
Yeah.
I'm constantly writing on post-it notes with a pen and paper. As soon as I feel perhaps some pain, or I feel it's something I don't
Mm.
know, then I'm trying to uh, ask people if they have the answers or support. And to me is a bit of spirituality. Just keep reaching out and asking for help when you need it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your ability to be self-reflective. And we were kind of laughing in our pre-chat when we were talking about all the Ironmans, and someone had questioned your your passion for Ironman. It's like, oh, you just replaced one addiction for another, which I thought was kind of funny. But what role has exercise played in your mental health?
Yeah, it's played a huge role. And I think yeah, if we have an addictive personality, we might as well replace the time we have done something destructive with something productive.
Yeah.
And so what better way than replacing sitting in a bar drinking with getting out in the nature or swimming in the ocean. And
Yeah.
and more importantly, and I shared this with my group after our call yesterday also, as I went for a bike ride. I said I was asked this question, and my natural answer that came to my mind from my heart was the community. And I thanked
Mm.
these people in my community yesterday and said, that's how much you guys
Oh,
mean to me. And,
yeah.
and they said the same. They said the same. And it doesn't matter if you're 16 or 17 years of age and you're a competitive athlete training for the Olympics. You need to be around people who can support you. But
Yeah.
also, if you're coming, if you're aging and you want to exercise, then perhaps it's even more important to get out and meet others, because you don't have a school class, you don't have perhaps so many people to
Right.
socialize with. So that is what I think sport has done with me. It has replaced those social hours I had in a bar with doing it in a way that is actually good for you.
No, I love that. I mean, in the parliaments of, 12-step recovery, they do talk about we need a sufficient substitute, something that has depth and weight to really have an impact on us. So I think that's beautiful. It's so um, I just loved how you described it. You sharing how much these people meant to you, and having that reciprocated. That is the kind of connection that carries us through the hard times, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking back, also even in my early sobriety, uh, sport played a huge role. In fact, through the recovery community, we set up a cycling group, and what we did was that we met in a crazy early hour, because if you want to cycle in Singapore before the traffic hits, you got to be up early. So we were meeting 4:15 a.m. and we were cycling for
That's
1 hour,
commitment.
and then we went to a early recovery meeting called the eye openers meeting at 6:30. And we met at that meeting to then have a coffee and have a recovery meeting and have a breakfast, then come home and shower. And what a great start to the day, right?
Jeez, that's amazing. Like you got more done by 7:30 in the morning than most than most people do all day. That's
Yeah.
that's intense. But yeah, there's something I used to go to an early morning meeting. I actually named my podcast after a group that I used to go to. It was they called it the ODAT group, and it met at 6 a.m. And I was there like every morning, like during the week. I just loved it. It was just a great way to. And there's something about those early morning meetings that is sort of like those are people that are serious about their recovery, right? It's like too early in the morning for any kind of BS. So those are great meetings. Let's talk a little bit about what life is like now. I know you do a lot of Ironman, top 2%. You have a men's you coach men. You wrote a book, Executive Loneliness, which I think is super important. I mean, I spent 10 years in Silicon Valley in the sort of startup tech world. And I mean, you can see it. Like these guys are like total workaholics. They're surrounded by people that are always demanding things from them and always in a place of leadership. It's like I often wondered, like, who do they turn to? Tell me a little bit about why you wrote this book and maybe some of the solutions you offer to help those people.
Yeah, and so coming then into the world of recovery and so on, I was very grateful for the support I got, and then I started to question basically, what do you do then if you don't have an addiction problem, if you don't have a gambling problem or social media problem, an alcohol or food addiction or
Something
something
that doesn't
else?
fit in a 12-step program.
Yeah. So that because that was because 1 year into my recovery, then something happened. I lost a friend of mine, sadly, in
Oh,
Singapore to suicide, and
oh.
that's when I realized that this if I would have kept falling, this could have been me. And then I thought, what help is it for people? How can we find, because most of the recovery programs are anonymous, what tools do we have and what support is there for us to find that? What can we do that is open for everyone to explore? And that then gave me the idea that I need to write a book about this. So that was the whole start. And it was to provide a resource that is there to help people. And at the core of this is actually my appendix. The appendix of my book is full of local resources of people you can call, everything from counselors, psychologists, hotlines. And I also at this stage then volunteered myself for a 24-hour hotline, the suicide hotline. I also volunteered to take the sobriety hotline for Singapore, which I had for 2 weeks at the time, a block, speaking to people then who wanted to know. So that was my call to action.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. We did I used to participate a lot in the hotline for 12 step in California. And it was really it was actually kind of a convenient way to be of service because you could just schedule some time. Like if you didn't have, if you had a busy schedule, you could still fit in blocks of time to just answer the phone for a while. And it was a really rewarding experience. In your book, your tagline, the 5 pathways to overcoming isolation, stress, anxiety, depression in the modern business world. What are some of those what are the pathways? Can you describe what they are and how they work?
Yeah, absolutely. And the pathways then basically are what I learned through the 12-step programs that could be there of use for any executive, someone perhaps, and many executives feel lonely or isolated in the workplace. I'm sure we all have heard the saying, it's lonely at the top.
Mhm.
So what is it that you can do to have a look at yourself basically as a busy executive? So stop, pause, and reflect on yourself, because as I mentioned before and as we spoke, that's something that most executives never have done. And one step that I found from the 12 steps then that was so fantastic that I brought across to my book is that one of taking stock, doing that inventory of ourselves.
Yeah.
So that's what I do with all my coaching clients now. Once we build some rapport, we are a few sessions in, they feel comfortable, then it's time to take stock.
I think it's so important to sort of meet people where they're at. And I've often wondered when someone is at the point where they feel like something's not right or they might need help, what is the kind of language that they're using? Are they saying, I'm really stressed out, my marriage is in crisis? What are the types of things that are bringing them to you? Like you mentioned, maybe it was a health crisis or relationship.
Many times, at least the men I'm working with, they really can't even explain what the problem is with them. They normally blame events. They will say, oh, I got fired from this job, or my ex-wife, she was a psychopath and this happened, she ran away with my 3 kids. They will
Mm,
just scream out all the drama or court cases, or my boss did this to me. So it will be a lot of the victim card and a lot of
mm.
anger. That's what I hear. And that's why, again, this step of taking stock is to try to slow it down and look at them, because they haven't looked at themselves. They can't, because they haven't even looked at how they are feeling. They also don't really understand their part in all of this. It's all about perhaps
Yeah.
blaming others.
Yeah, that is so interesting. It's so I mean, honestly, it's a survival skill, right? You detach from your own emotions so that you can, do the work, right? Workaholism is very much aligned with, alcoholism. It's a denial of personal needs. It's an obsession. It takes up all your time, and workaholism will destroy your family just as quickly as alcohol will. Um, so it's interesting that they present with the victim mentality and the anger, but like a total absence of like it's like bewilderment. It's like, how did I get here? It's just like with people that have a problem with drinking. It's like, how did I get here? How do you help? And so is it the inventory process, the self-reflection that helps them sort of get back in touch with their feelings?
Yes, it is, and we are trying then also to work on opening up, meditation and prayer to them, exercise, working also on then a healthier diet, coming into the community, then working one on one with them, and then coming into the community, and especially men are focused, so they see and come in then in the community where we have the chat group. They see the gratitude list of the men who's been working on themselves for perhaps 3 months or so, where they can see the progress. And while it might be overwhelming at first because they most likely have never been exposed to something like this, and it's a bit of a culture shock almost for
Yeah,
them to see this, and
yeah,
the natural tendency in the beginning might be, well, I cannot be part of this is crazy. But then it's about overcoming and accepting that and coming to terms with that, and then
yeah,
just baby stepping themselves to coming to working this. And the way I do it then is that, in the beginning it's about can you write and sometimes if they cannot call it a gratitude list, then even just a blessing list, and write down
uh,
2 or 3 things. You can write it for yourself, just practice that, or you can send me a private message or email once a week or something. So it's just starting to fish them in, coming closer to their
mm,
emotions,
mhm.
what they're grateful for, but also then what the issues are. But we don't I don't I at least don't want to focus only on the negatives. We have to sort
Oh
of
yeah, for sure.
play with both sides. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so important to balance it out because it's so easy to just get wrapped up in what's not working. We have like this negativity bias. We're always looking to solve problems. And I would imagine that, in the business realm, that's what we do, that we solve problems. That's what business is about. But to also think about the assets too, like what's going well, and then just do more of that. That seems really important.
Yes, absolutely. And as soon as they put that on paper, and then we have it journalized, then we know we have something. Because it's about finding the few things, as you say, that are working, and
Yeah.
let's learn what we can do more of this and avoid other stuff, and then coming to heal and to terms with it.
Yeah, that's really good. What's your favorite part of the process when you're working with somebody?
I think it's the process that is very, very painful, and it's something I also learned from the 12-step program, and it's my step 4, which is about the relationships. It's about
Yeah.
making the amends and so on, and taking. So I take my clients, executives, the non-alcoholics or non-problem drinkers, or any of those people who would never have been exposed to a 12-step program, also
Yeah.
helping them through this step to make amends. And that's where I see the biggest breakthroughs and
Mm,
changes in their lives.
I can see that. Yeah, I've seen that myself. And what happens afterwards? I always like to focus on the benefits, like what's life like for them afterwards?
Oh, they are so relieved, many of them. I'm working with
Mm,
one man now. He had 37 amends to do. Last week, he's done 4 now. And it's mixing them to do with individuals and mixing them with institutions. And, institutions can be tax bills that was not dealt with. And it can be closing down a business entity that is doormat, and these kind of things where bills have been ponding up, and a credit card bill that's supposed to be paid. So it's about really making that list of it, and then giving them the support to deal with it. And
Yeah.
even I remember when I made my amends myself during that time, it was some things that I was just scared to call. There was some institution regarding my student loan, and I was just too much anxious. But once I brainstorm and talk to someone how to solve it. We can perhaps ask someone who's an expert in that area, someone who can help us. We can write the power of attorney to someone and they can support us. And now I'm just passing that gift on and helping them to
Yeah.
just make a plan for it and solve it.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. What I've heard people talk about making amends in a couple of different ways. How do you think about making what is an important piece of making amends? It's not just an apology, but what constitutes an amends in your mind?
Yeah, I think it's very important to try to find the right setting for it and not rush it. And I can give an example of making amend with my sister. She's 3 years younger than me, and the years when I was going through a difficult time, I have a son also with my ex-wife, and we were at the lunch gathering with the family, and she gave a Coke to him, and he was 5 years of age. He had never drank a Coke in his life before,
Uh-oh.
and I got quite angry. And I that time I also didn't have the patience or know how to handle such a conversation. So my way would not be to argue or scream or shout. It would be to pull my son off the table and just walk away quietly. And she tried to call me after, message me. I didn't respond. I basically didn't respond to anything for about 6 months or so after that. So the relationship went cold. When we met later at family gatherings from time to time, I would just say hello, but I wouldn't strike any conversation whatsoever. There was no communication between us, between those. So it was very cold. So when I made my amends, I needed to sort this one out. And I waited for the chance to ask her if we could go for a lunch. And I said, there's something I'd like to discuss. And yes, I apologize for the incident, but I also then explained the space I had been in and the work I was doing now and where I wanted to go. And then I ended by asking her if there was something I can do to make things right. And she was just relieved and happy that I was better now. And she was worried about me because the way it happened and so on.
Yeah.
And then it was solved just then and there. And it's just such a relief when that happens, right?
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful thing. And I would imagine your relationship has been a lot better since then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, co-parent. That's beautiful. I was hoping you would say, what can I do to make it right? Because that is really the important part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the one that perhaps is most uncomfortable of it, and the one we worry about. But everyone I'm coaching now, I make sure to underline that one because
Yeah.
it's not done until you have done that one.
Yeah. And I had a mentor who would also include to give them space to say, is there anything you need to tell me? Like, is there anything else I should know? And I was like, ooh, that's pretty intense. But that's
Oh
really
yeah.
powerful,
So you open
right?
up for the other person to make amends, then, right? If they have something else.
Well, well, I had to make amends to my sister. And it was really a hard one because family for me, I don't know, it was just really hard. I had tried to make amends to her like a few times and it just didn't go well. And so I would say probably 3 years ago, I was like, look, I need to sit you down. Like I'm 30 years sober now, right? But I just never felt like I just didn't feel like it was done. I don't know. And plus there was stuff that happened since, when I got sober between then and now, right? And I had to she didn't wanna talk to me in person, she wanted to do it, over the phone. So, I tried to meet her in person, she didn't want to. We met over the phone, and I was like, "Look, I can see how my behavior," and I listed some things, "must have made you feel." And she acknowledged, yeah, it was really hard. And, it was a lot of, you made me feel like this. I was silent. I was like, yes, I acknowledge, I accept that. And it was, is there anything else? Have I done? This is what I think. Is there anything else you need to tell me? Like, was there anything else I had done that I still need to take responsibility for? And she mentioned a couple of things, my mom would, often say things to me and then share it with my sister. And she's like, stop talking about me with mom. And I was like, I get it, done. And that was really hard. It was hard to hear, but yeah, and then and then I was done, and then I felt clean, and I'm not saying, like, our relationship really got that much better afterwards, but I was at peace that I took responsibility. I asked her, "Is there anything else, like, is there anything I can do to make it right?" And the whole 9, and it was really uncomfortable, and I'm not gonna pretend like, we became closer after that. We really kind of didn't, but I didn't know, that was all I could do. So amends don't always mean that you're gonna be closer after, but I felt clean after. Like, I did what I was supposed to do, and I felt clean within myself, like, that was it.
It's a wonderful story, and I agree with you. We cannot also control if it's going to be closer after, but at least there's something relieved from us, right? We feel lighter. We feel that we've sort of done the right thing, and we at least can move forward more freer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay to move forward after that. Well, listen, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot and I feel like we covered a lot of ground. If people are interested in working with you or finding out about men's groups or maybe even just asking for your help, how do people reach out to you?
I'm quite active on LinkedIn. They can find me there. It's Nick Jonsson, NickJonsson, or my website is nickjonsson.com. Those would be the two places. My book is on there as well as on Amazon, and it's Executive Loneliness.
Yeah, great book. I'm going to leave a link to your LinkedIn, your website, and I'll leave the direct Amazon link to your book because I think that's really important to get that message out there. And thank you so much for being willing to share your story. And I feel like when we recover out loud, maybe we'll catch some of those people who just didn't know that there is a solution.
Yes, wonderful. Keep up the great job, Alina.
Thank you. So have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
One last thing before you go, if you enjoyed the podcast today, please don't forget to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and leave a review. And if you'd like to make a donation to the podcast and help me keep the lights on, you can do so by visiting odatchat.com. There's a donation button or membership button on the right-hand side. Have a great day. Thank you so much for joining us.